What's up, Grace? It's good to see you guys. Happy Thursday. I'm excited to be here with you. I want to invite you to stand. We're going to get started off worshiping together. So let's sing this together. Let's worship Him. He is good. He is worthy of our praise. Let's sing this together.
Remember those walls that we called sin and shame. They were like prisons that we couldn't escape. But He came and He died and He rose. Those walls are up now. Remember those giants we called death and grave. They were like mountains that stood in our way. But He came and He died and He rose. Those giants are dead now. Sing, this is our God, this is who He is. He loves us. This is our God, this is what He does. He saves us. He bore the cross, beat the grave, let heaven and earth proclaim. This is our God, King Jesus. Remember that fear that took our breath away. Faith so weak that we could barely pray. But He heard every word, every whisper. Now those altars in the wilderness, they tell the story of His faithfulness. Never once did He fail, and He never will. This is our God, this is who He is. He loves us. This is our God, this is what He does. He saves us. He bore the cross and He beat the grave. Let heaven and earth proclaim. This is our God, King Jesus. Who pulled me out of that pit? He did, He did. Who paid for all of our sin? Nobody but Jesus. Who pulled me out of that pit? He did, yes He did. And who paid for all of our sin? Nobody but Jesus. Who rescued me from hell? Yahweh, Yahweh. And who gets the glory and praise? Nobody but Jesus. Who rescued me from that grave? Yahweh, Yahweh. Who gets the glory and praise? Nobody but Him. This is our God. This is who He is. He loves us. Yes, this is our God. This is what He does. He saves us. He bore the cross and He beat the grave. Let heaven and earth proclaim. This is our God, King Jesus. He bore the cross, beat the grave. Let heaven and earth proclaim. This is our God, King Jesus. King Jesus.
How I long to breathe the air of heaven, where pain is gone and mercy fills the streets. To look upon the one who bled to save me and walk with Him for all eternity. standing face to face with He who died and rose again. Holy, holy is the Lord. In every prayer we prayed in desperation, the songs of faith we sang through doubt and fear. In the end, we'll see that it was worth it when He returns to wipe away our tears. And there will be a day when all will bow before Him. There will be a day when death will be no more. Standing face to face with He who died and rose again. Holy, holy is the Lord. And on that day, we join the resurrection and stand beside the heroes of the faith with one voice, 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. And on that day, we join the resurrection and stand beside the heroes of the faith. Oh, with one voice, 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Forever He shall reign. So let it be today. We shout the hymn of heaven with angels and the saints. We raise a mighty roar, glory to our God, who gave His life beyond the grave. Holy, holy is the Lord. So let it be today. We shout the hymn of heaven with angels and the saints. We raise a mighty roar, glory to our God, who gave His life beyond the grave. Holy, holy is the Lord. Holy, holy is the Lord. Holy, holy is the Lord. God, we thank You for that truth, that we can sing Your praises as one voice because You are worthy of our praise. God, You love us more than we could ever imagine. And we want to posture ourselves in such a way tonight that we can just surrender to You. Every part, every aspect of our life devoted to You, God, because You're holy. Let's sing this. We cry, holy, holy, holy. We cry, holy, holy. Sing that. Yes, we cry, holy, holy, holy is the Lamb. Sing, we fall down. We fall down. We lay our crown. At the feet of Jesus we cry, holy. Sing, we cry, holy. Let's lift our voices with that. Sing, we cry, holy, holy, holy. Yes, we cry, holy, holy. He's worthy of all of our praise. And we cry, holy, holy, holy. And we cry, holy, holy, holy. One more time. We cry, holy, holy is the Lamb. You holy God, you worthy. God, we thank you and we love you. It's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen. Thanks so much for singing and worshiping alongside of us. You can go ahead and have a seat.
Well, thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Daniel. I have the privilege of leading the young adult ministry here at Grace. And I do just want to pause and say something that's just true about this time frame at our church. With the new year, brings a lot of new faces to Grace Fellowship. And for a moment, I want to talk directly to those of you who are new. Maybe you just started coming in the last couple weeks, or you started coming before the holidays, and this has become a regular rhythm in your life. First of all, thank you so much for joining us and being here and making time to be with us every week. And I want you to know something about our church. Our church's goal and the heart of what we do is to help people live Jesus-centered lives. And we want to do that and help you live a Jesus-centered life, or at least learn what it looks like to live a Jesus-centered life. And part of that is helping you take your next step in your faith journey. And I know that so much of learning to live a Jesus-centered life happens during spaces and times just like this, for the hour or so that we're in a room every weekend together for service. But here at Grace, so much of learning to live a Jesus-centered life happens in environments outside of this room, and outside of even just a Thursday or a Sunday. And one of the ways that you can learn more about this thing that we call Christianity and faith in Christ is to get more connected to those different environments, whether they be different Bible study groups or small groups, or just different environments where you can even connect to a ministry and serve. And the best way to figure out all of those different avenues to connect is to do something that we call Connect Class here at Grace. Connect Class is a short class that happens on the weekend where you get to meet some of our staff, learn more about what we're about, and learn all the different avenues and ways that you can connect here at Grace. Connect Class is coming up next weekend. We would love to see you there if you're looking to get plugged in here. You can go online to the Engage page on our website, and you'll see all the details there for how to sign up for the class, as well as some more details for that. But we would love to see you there if you're new here and looking to get plugged in. Now, there's one specific way that you can get plugged in if you're a lady here at Grace. We actually have something coming up in just a few weeks called the Women's Retreat. And the Women's Retreat is a perfect opportunity to do what the name suggests, for the ladies of our church to retreat and to get away for a few days. And that space is super, super valuable. We do men's retreats as well. And every time I've gone on one of those retreats, it's been just really formative in my own soul and my faith with Christ. But it's also a really big catalyst for building relationships with other people here at Grace. So if you're a woman here at Grace, I would really encourage you to sign up for the women's retreat that's coming up. You don't have a ton of time left to sign up, so I would encourage you to do that. Husbands and dads in the room, this is an opportunity for us to own the home for a couple days, make time, make space for our wife to get away and have that special time with the Lord. So would encourage you to go to the Engage page again if you are looking for more information for that, or if you are wanting to sign up. Now tonight we're finishing up a series that we've been in over the last couple weeks called Don't Do Normal, which means next week we're starting a brand new conversation that we're really looking forward to.
Church, it's a word that means a lot to a lot of people. When I say church, for some of you, you think place, you think a building. For some of you, you think a people. And then when some of you think about a people that is the church, you think about the church globally, the church all over the world. And then some of you think about a church being a local church, like a specific church. And then when we think about churches that are local, man, there's just all shapes and all sizes. There's big churches, there's little churches. There's churches that have loud music and churches that have quiet music. Churches that take communion every single week and churches that take communion maybe twice a year. And you've got all these different styles and approaches and vibes and all of this. And the question is, why? Well, for a few weekends here at Grace, we want to think about the why of this church. I mean, after all, you either go to Grace or you're thinking about coming to Grace. And so we want to spend a little bit of time saying, why is Grace the way that Grace is? By design, that it's designed on purpose for a purpose and that you play a role in that. And what is that role? And what should it look like to be a part of Grace? So we're going to do that over the next few weekends where we think about this specific church and why we are the way that we are. So I really hope that you'll be here, you'll prioritize listening in, leaning in, learning in about Grace Fellowship and its design.
Grace, it is good to be with you this weekend, and I do hope we'll be together again next weekend for that conversation and echo a lot of what Keith said. But if you're like new here, still figuring out Grace, it'll be a perfect series for you. If you've been around for a while and this feels routine, this will be a great either refresher or like a really good understanding of the why behind the what of what goes on. So no matter who you are, next week will be a great week to be back at church. But glad you're here this weekend as we're wrapping up this conversation on the series Don't Do Normal. My name is Jake. I'm the campus pastor here at Pickerington campus. So whatever campus you're joining from, thanks for being with us here this weekend. And we've been saying this phrase, we don't want to do normal. And the reason why we've said that is because we're saying out loud, hey, normal's not working great. In fact, in week one, we looked at a lot of different just statistics of things like, what are the realities of divorce rates and even things like obesity and anxiety and depression and different numbers that would reflect that the average life of the average person isn't great right now, or it's not what we'd want it to be. And so normal isn't something we go, hey, let's do more of that. Rather, it's something we go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to live that way. And certainly, if you are a follower of God, you would say, hey, I don't want to live a normal life. I want to live a life for Jesus. And so how do we get our arms around all of that? Well, the goal of this series is a lot of what I just said, but I want to put it to you this way, is we want to live with a godly focus. All right, so not just any type of focus, but a godly focus that fights against, quote, normal and builds spiritual fruit. So a godly focus that fights against normal and ultimately yields spiritual fruit. So we're pushing back against the normal rhythms and routines of life to say, I want to have a life that is good, that's rich, that's honoring to God, and good for me and my soul and my life as well. And so that's the endeavor we've been on. In week one, we talked about the idea of godly focus. What does it look like to move from like normal cycles of things in your life to real godly transformation? How does that happen? We talked about that week one. Week two, we talked about discouragement. That it's one thing to be discouraged, it's another thing to stay discouraged. So how do we, when discouragement comes, look at that with spiritual sight in such a way that isn't normal, but actually helps us navigate that well? Then last week, we talked about finances. We talked about money. So there's a big difference between giving and being a person who is generous. And how are you not normal with your money, but rather have a godly focus that produces spiritual fruit? And all of those have been incredibly helpful messages. If you've been here, I hope you've experienced that personally. But for me personally, they've been so good and so rich. And so if you missed any of those, make sure you go back and watch those free. We would love for you to see those and engage those and grow alongside of them, right? But this week, we're going to keep rolling with something that we don't want to be normal within, all right? But I want to start with this. I want to zoom out for a second, and I want to give us something that I actually say is true for all of us. It's a dream we all have that's like implicit in this conversation about not wanting to do normal. We don't want to do normal for a lot of reasons, but here's the dream I think that you and I have that is underneath all of this, is that actually you want a meaningful life that is sustainable. You want a meaningful life that is sustainable. I think in a lot of ways, that's the dream, and here's why. You might not use the word meaningful, but you would say like, I want my life to have purpose. I want it to have value. I want to make an impact. I don't want to waste my life. I want to leave a legacy. Like I want my life to matter. I want it to be meaningful. So we want that to be true, while at the same time, we want it to be sustainable. So not just like meaningful and I can do it for like 3 weeks and then I'm exhausted and worn out, but meaningful and something that can keep going over time. So like this is good and rich and it's not wasteful. And this is huge, I'm excited to wake up tomorrow and do it again. I'm excited to wake up next week and keep going with this life that I've created. We want a meaningful life that feels and is sustainable. Now here is the challenge. That is hard to do. It's hard to do. And I would say it's not normal. It's not normal to have a really meaningful life that you're like, yeah, this is sustainable over time. And I want to help us maybe see why that's the case, all right? So let's get there by way of maybe an illustration for a second. I've actually been processing this, and I feel like this will sound like a ridiculous statement for a second, but hang with me, okay? I think life is a lot like DoorDash ordering of food, okay? Not something you probably expect to hear at church this weekend, but this is how I think it rolls, okay? Here's why I think that. I don't know if you've experienced DoorDash or Uber Eats or something like that, but you say, hey, this is what I want from this restaurant, and they bring it to you. And here's how it's worked for me. If I order like 1 or 2 things, it almost always comes the right way, okay? So if I'm going, hey, I want a burger and fries from Wendy's, and they send that, you know what I usually get? I usually get a burger and fries. But I've been in scenarios, a lot of them, where it's like I'm with a group of people, and I'm the one who's getting all their orders, and I put it in right. And if I get up to like 7 or 8 orders on that thing, when those things come and actually show up to the door, 4 or 5 are right? The other 2 or 3 are like, I ordered a salad, but I actually got a panini, or I wanted no cheese on my burger, but I got cheese on my burger, and who got the cottage cheese? Did anybody get the cottage cheese? And like, there's just a lot that starts to get messed up. And here's what I think is true about our life. Is that when there's just like 1 or 2 things to manage that we put in the cart, so to speak, I think it usually works out all right. We can manage that, we can deal with that, we can have all of that together. But once we start like stacking things up, we start to realize like it's really hard for all of those things to turn out the way we want them to turn out. All right, so let me maybe illustrate this a little bit. We want to have a good job, right? So you want to have a job that has meaning, that has purpose, that you like and enjoy. And so you want to give good energy to your job and add value. So you add that to the cart, click, put that in. Now you also want to have good physical health, right? And so you're like, okay, I want to get to my job early, but I also want to make sure before I get to my job, I do a little exercise, right? I want to make sure I'm healthy, I want to watch the gut, I want to make sure I have energy for things, right? So you want to have physical health as well. So what do? You click, you add that to the cart of your life, right? You have a good job, now you're physically healthy, but I don't want to wake up too early to go to the gym and also get early to work because I need to have good emotional and mental health. Right? And so I need to make sure I'm not a jerk. And if I don't get sleep, I'm kind of a jerk. So I need to make sure I sleep enough to have good mental and emotional health. And I also realize alongside my job and physical health and emotional health and mental health, those things are in the cart, I want to have good friendships. Right? Friendships are good for me and they're fun and they bring joy to life. They also help me and keep me accountable. So click, let's add that to the cart. That's another thing we want to add. But I don't want to spend too much time with my friends. You know why? Because my spouse is important. Right? And if I spend too much time with them, what starts to happen is they go, I don't feel like we're connecting enough in our marriage, so I need to make sure my marital health is good. Click, add that to the cart. And then it's like, well, we got kids. I don't know where they came from, but now we have them. Right? And the kids got to do stuff. In fact, they have a lot of stuff to do. So it's this practice, and then it's another practice, and then it's dance, and then it's another thing they got going on. We got craft time at home, so let's add that to the cart to make sure that we're healthy with the kids. And underneath all of this, I want to have great spiritual health. So I want to read my Bible, and I want to pray, and I want to go to church, and I want to get in a small group like everybody should be in, right? And I want to do that. So I click and I add that to the cart. And then you put all that together and you submit the order, and then it comes and it all shows up at the house. And here's what I would say: good luck. Good luck. Good luck having that whole order turn out to where you're like, oh, this feels like it's going great. Right? How often do we look at all of those categories of our life and go, I feel like every single one of those is like humming. Right? I feel great about it. I feel like it's good. I feel like meaningful and purpose and sustainable. I feel like I can take on the world, right? What ends up happening as we look around at all of those things that are good things in our life, and there's often even more than that, we end up going, I want a meaningful life, and I want it to be sustainable. But that doesn't always feel normal. You know what feels normal is you add up all of those things, and it doesn't feel like meaningful and sustainable. It feels like this. Normal feels like I have a demanding life that feels overwhelming. I have a demanding life that feels overwhelming. This is normal. It's normal. In fact, I think it's so normal that we have to recreate over time like figures of speech to describe the same thing that basically is in essence saying, I'm busy or there's too much going on. So I want to read a few of these to you. I'm guessing you've said these. Maybe even today you said these. I don't know. I'm swamped, right? I'm swamped right now. I got a lot of plates spinning. A lot of plates spinning in my life. Another one to do with plates, I just got a lot on my plate. You know, this isn't like a random day of leftovers. This is Thanksgiving dinner right now. Man, my plate is full. I got a lot on my plate. I feel stretched thin in my life right now. I feel like I'm on the hamster wheel, right? I just keep going and going and going. I feel like I'm getting where I want to get to. I can't wrap my arms around it. Right? I'm up to my eyeballs in work or in parenting or in some aspect of my life. I'm juggling a lot. I feel burnt out. I'm at the end of my rope. I could probably keep going. Those are all ways of saying the same thing. In fact, the reason why we're having this conversation right now, in part, is because a lot of times when people come to us and we're talking through something, or when we come to you and go, hey, how are you doing? Or sometimes, hey, I haven't seen you at church in a while, or I know you haven't been to group. What's going on? Are you okay? So often we hear these words. We're just busy. We're just busy. And sometimes right after that comes the calendar where you start to list off, here's all the things. I got to care about this, and I got to get after this, and this got added, and this thing in my life, and then this health thing happened, and I just am busy. And here's the deal, guys. For better or worse, that is normal. It's normal. In fact, a lot of times what happens in our culture is that gets worn as like a badge of honor. Right? It's like, hey, I'm busier than you. Look at all the stuff I have going on. You think you're busy? Look how busy I am. And for some of us, it's like the grind and the hustle, and you're like weirdly proud of it. But still you'd go, man, I don't feel like I can keep up with this because it's just overwhelming, and I feel busy, and I don't know what to do with it. In fact, like Jesus would say, hey, I've come to give you life and life to the full. And I think we go, I want life to the full, but here's what I'm afraid a lot of us experience. Life doesn't feel to the full, it feels too full. It's like, man, you say I need to care about this and this, and man, disciple people and reach people and have a good prayer life and care about my marriage and my kids and invest in this and be healthy, and my body's a temple. And you start to add up all that and you're like, it just feels too full. I feel like what life needs from me is more than I can consistently give. And I'm overwhelmed, and it makes me anxious, and I feel like I can't keep doing this, and so I feel like I gotta get rid of something. And so what is it that I should do? Because normal feels exhausting and overwhelming. So let's not do normal. The question is, how? What does it look like to navigate life in such a way that doesn't always feel like this? We're gonna go to a text in a moment, but before we do, I want to give a couple of things to give us a framework for how we process this, all right? So the first is this. We said at the beginning that we all want to have a meaningful life that is sustainable. To be really clear about our conversation right now, what we believe wholeheartedly is that a meaningful life is a Jesus-centered life. And so we're not talking about a meaningful life that you or I could describe as success or jobs or pleasure, whatever. It's a Jesus-centered life, okay? So a Jesus-centered life, and then how do we live a sustainable life? It's a spirit-dependent life. So when we say a meaningful and sustainable life, what we're saying is it's a Jesus-centered, spirit-dependent life that's for the glory and the good of the Father, okay? So that is what is meaningful, and if you're a Christian, that's what you believe, and you might not use those words, but like that's how we want to live. So that's what we're talking about, okay? Now, secondly, here's what I want to make sure we hear as we walk through this. This isn't going to be a sermon where I'm like, what we all should do is sell our houses and go live in a cave and just do nothing all day long and eliminate anything that could ever make us busy. Right? This is one of those things that you'll hear this phrase sometimes. It's not a problem to solve, it's a tension to manage. All of these different things that I just mentioned and more are often good things. The question is, how do we manage all of those things together? So this isn't gonna be a message where I'm like, hey, just don't be busy. Rather, how are we busy about the right things? How are we busy about the godly things? How are we ordering our life in such a way where we're like, all this is good, even though sometimes it does feel busy. But normal is overwhelming and often not filled with the right things. So how do we not do that? How do we live at peace, on purpose, intentional, disciplined, where we feel great, even if there's a lot going on around us? Let's go to the Bible and see a passage where I actually think it gives us somewhat of a filter for and principles for how to do this. All right, so if you have your Bible, open it up to the book of Ephesians and make your way to chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5. As you make your way to that, let me give a little bit of context because we're going to pick it up towards the end of this letter. And really, the book of Ephesians is a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to Christians in Ephesus. That's why it's called Ephesians. And so he's writing to these believers and he's saying some things to instruct them. And I'll very, very quickly summarize what he's saying. First, he's saying, hey, you guys are Christians. This is all the way back to the beginning of the book of Ephesians. You guys are Christians who've been saved by Jesus. He's redeemed you. He's transformed you. He's changed you. He's changed you from the inside out. He's changed your identity and everything about you because he's great. He's awesome. He's forgiven you, all of that. So because of that, you're a new person. You have a new identity. And if you're a new person with a new identity, you should live differently. So you should enjoy and worship God, and your life should look different. So he starts to unpack that in Ephesians 4. We're going to pick it up in Ephesians 5, where he's kind of summarizing some of these thoughts. And in the text, we're going to work through some of the principle, and then after, we're going to work through some of the practical application of it, all right? So let's pick it up in Ephesians 5, where it says this in verse 15. Starts by saying, be very careful then how you live. Right off the jump. Be very careful how you live. In Ephesians 4, before we got here, he said, hey, you guys as Christians no longer live like you used to live before, like you did when you were a Gentile. It says, put off your old self, put on your new self. Ephesians 5 at the beginning, it says, follow God's example and walk in the way of love. And so what he's basically saying is don't just do normal. Don't do normal, because normal looks like you're just working your way through life the same way you did before you were a Christian or as non-Christian do. And Paul's saying, don't. In fact, not only don't do that, not only don't do normal, but you have to be very, very careful how you live. In fact, he unpacks that in the next sentence. He says, not as unwise, but as wise. So he's like, hey, here's what I get, church in Ephesus. Here's what I get. This isn't going to be easy. It's going to take wisdom, because there's a lot I know in your life. And to order that and manage that and prioritize, it's going to take wisdom. Here's what you know and what I know. If something takes wisdom, it's usually a challenging thing. We don't need wisdom for the really obvious things in our life. For example, nobody has ever come into my office and said, you know what, Pastor Jake, I'm just processing something I want some wisdom on. We talked about generosity last week, and I'm really trying to think about how do I have some more income to be able to just be more generous. And so I was wondering about this. I want your wisdom. Should I rob a bank? Should I go do that? Is that smart? Because I'd have more money to get. Nobody's asking that question. They don't need wisdom on that. They know it's wrong. So wisdom often isn't is it a good thing or a bad thing? Usually we know that. Sometimes wisdom is needed to decide which good thing should I prioritize? How should I order these good things? These are all good. How do I put those together? And so it's going to take work. And let me pause here for a moment. If some of you here are hearing this and you're like, I'm kind of annoyed because right now I feel this in my life. I feel overwhelmed. And maybe even you say, I feel like I'm drowning, or I feel like I can't catch up, whatever it may be. For a moment, what I want to do is say, it's hard to do this. And if you feel that way, a part of what Paul's saying implicitly here is it's a challenge to live in such a way that feels sustainable and meaningful. And so if that's you, God sees you, God loves you, and I don't think it's a coincidence that you're here tonight. And I hope you lean into this to go, man, how can I start to shift some things in me? So be very careful, not as unwise, but as wise. And he keeps saying the same type of thing in different ways, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. And I love what Paul says here. He says, because the days are evil. What he's reminding them of is we're not just talking about how do you have a slightly better life? How do you increase your 401k just a little bit? How do you leave a slightly better legacy for your kids? What he's saying is, remember, guys, there's a spiritual battle happening. Eternity hangs in the balance. It does. Real people are going to heaven. Real people are going to hell. Real people are either experiencing the joy and hope of Jesus or they're not. So the days are evil, so we have to make the most of every opportunity. It's there is a war going on. Just real spiritual warfare, not just out there, but for your heart and for my heart. And Paul's going, make the most of every opportunity, be wise within all of that. You know what the enemy would love for our church and for you? is to make you so overwhelmed by life that you're unable to see and experience the goodness of God. To where it's just all so much that like days, maybe weeks and months go by, and you haven't paused to go, God has been so good to me. You know what the enemy would love? For you and I to be so busy that we just don't have time for the things of God. Pastor Jake, I just got so much stuff going on. I just don't know that I have time. The enemy would love to fill your calendar so much to where you don't have time for the things that matter most. And so Paul's going, not only is this gonna take like wisdom that is from the Spirit, and it's gonna be careful. Remember, it's gonna be a challenge. There's a spiritual war going on, so we have to make the most. And then he says this, I love he pivots for a second to some personal responsibility. He says, therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. So there's a part of Paul here where I feel like he's going, hey, you gotta be careful. It's gonna take wisdom. There's a spiritual war, so there's a lot going on. But then I think he just like simplifies it for a bit, but he's like, but come on, y'all. Some of y'all just need to stop being dumb. Like, stop being dumb. Stop being foolish. Like, some of you are just saying yes to stuff without even thinking about it. Stop. Some of you are prioritizing things in a crazy way. It's like, it's foolish. Don't. And for some of us, I feel like you need comforted because like you're really trying to do the right things and this is all just feeling overwhelming. But for others, like your life is overwhelming because you've been foolish. And there are aspects of your life where you're like, I don't even know how I ended up getting here. I heard a Christian author say one time that we need to be careful to not be amateurs at our own life. And I feel like sometimes as it pertains to our calendar, and I've been here before, all of a sudden I'll pull up a week or a day and I'm like, how did all this get here? But yet we're in charge of our calendar. So Paul's like, hey, as it pertains to your life and how you set things up, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Part of why we want you to show up to church, to be in a small group, to read your Bible, to pray, so many reasons, but this is such a big part of it, to understand what the Lord's will is. Who is God? What does he want for my life? How should I make decisions? What should I say yes or no to? It's gonna take work and time. It's why, again, we want you in a group and we want you here. So we'd better understand this so we can live careful and with wisdom. So all of that is great. It's Paul giving us instructions, some principles on how to not lead towards busy and overwhelmed in an unhealthy way, but rather to order things well. But then he goes on to say this, and this is incredibly important. Do not get drunk on wine or filled with wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. So he is saying, don't get drunk. Being drunk is a sin. Don't do that. But he's also saying within this, don't like mess with your decision-making faculties. Don't be so filled with wine that you're unable to navigate life in a wise way. That's dumb. Don't do it. Don't numb those things. So don't get drunk for a lot of reasons, but in part so that you know how to navigate your day well. But he's saying be filled with the Spirit. And this is a whole nother sermon or sermon series. But he's going, if you want to do this well, it's going to take a supernatural help of the person of God. So learn what it's like to be full of the Spirit. And not just like that in a theological sense where you're like, I want the Spirit of God in my life. But where you go, you know where my hope comes from? It comes from the fact that I'm a saved person, the Spirit of God's with me, and I know his presence is there all the time. So my hope is in that, my peace is in that, my joy is in that. So be filled with the Spirit. And then he gives a picture, like a glimpse in some ways of what sort of things happen when you live like this. He says this happens on the other side of being Spirit-filled and wise and careful. You end up speaking to one another with psalms and hymns and songs from the Spirit. Sing and make music from your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. It's almost like a picture of like a rom-com or a musical where somebody's so happy they're just singing everywhere they go. I don't know if that's your life. It doesn't always feel like mine. You're walking into work just singing a little tune, right? A little favorite song you're just singing because you're just overjoyed. It's like life's good. God's good. You guys want to sing? You want to just like bust out in song right now? And he's going, hey, you're overflowing with thanksgiving that you're like, God, I just want to praise you and I want to sing and I want to be thankful. It's like, man, when we're living a life in all of these ways, that sort of disposition starts to happen, which feels a lot different than what is normal. Where we're just getting by. Another day, another paycheck. We're just getting through it. It's normal. And we don't want to do normal. So how do we live a life that's meaningful, that's on purpose, that's intentional? That, man, it feels like we're excited about the coming days as we live a Jesus-centered life dependent on the Spirit for the glory of the Father. I want to give you a phrase that I think kind of boils down what Paul is saying. Boils down what it looks like to principally think about this, and then we're going to unpack it practically. So if we're going to have a life that's meaningful and sustainable, it comes down to years like that and months and then days that ultimately add up to that. So here's the way I would say it to you, that ultimately well-ordered days demand God-given discernment. Well-ordered days demand God-given discernment. We'll unpack that. Well-ordered means you just have the right stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not busy. It doesn't mean that you don't have a lot going on. It just means that the right things are in the right place. You know you've ordered things well and with intentionality. And what does it mean to do that? It demands God-given discernment. It's hard. You need wisdom. You need the Spirit of God. You need to know what the Lord's will is. It's not easy. And what's normal is to just kind of go through life and sometimes see what happens. But Paul's going, don't do that. Be very, very careful. In fact, be a discerning person. He doesn't use that word directly, but he's talking all around it in the way he's speaking about how we should live. That word discernment, you can think about it different ways. I saw a lot of different definitions when I looked it up. Somebody said it's thinking God's thoughts, right? Trying to think the way God would think. Saw another person say it's applying the Bible to every area of your life. Right? There's different ways you can think about it, but it's the essence of going, I know what I'm to do and I apply it in different areas. But the word discernment, if you look it up in the New Testament, is this word anakrino. Anakrino. And if you were to actually look up like what does that word mean and what's within it, it's to investigate, to scrutinize, and to examine. All right? I bet you haven't heard that kind of flavor of discernment before, but what it means is investigate, to scrutinize, to examine. In essence, like be Sherlock Holmes. Right? Like look around and go, what is this telling me? What's the data? In fact, it's sometimes used in the sense of a judge, right? A judge, picture what they do. They're hearing information all the time going, okay, what's the right call on this? Okay, I hear more information. I take that in, I process that, I put it alongside everything else. A discerning person does that. They go, I want this God-given discernment to know what all is here and how to move forward. And if we're gonna have well-ordered days that don't feel busy and overwhelmed, it's going to demand God-given discernment. So how do we be busy with the right things? How do we order our life well? How do we have discernment? 3 ways that I think Paul is principally talking about discernment that I want to give you maybe a practical way it can play out as it pertains to your life. And you think about ordering things in it. All right, first one is this as it pertains to discernment. If we're going to be a discerning person, we have to define reality accurately. Okay, to define reality accurately. Paul says, be very careful how you live. I don't know if you can be very careful how you live if you don't have like a really good understanding of what life is really like right now. Like if you really don't know, like, man, how are things actually going? Not like how do I feel about things, but have I really examined them and investigated them? Do I define reality accurately? A lot of you know, my wife and I have 3 kids, and the oldest 2, Micah and Gray, are 4 and 3, and right now they share a room, which is fun, amongst a lot of other words about how that feels, but they share a room. And so what's supposed to happen at a certain point of the evening is they go into their rooms and they go to bed, right? And they're supposed to be quiet and stay in bed, but they don't do that very often because they're young and they have other ideas, okay? So what will often happen is we'll be in like the family room, they'll be in bed where they're supposed to be, and we'll start to like hear a little bit of whispering. And then the whispering will turn into talking, and then talking will turn into playing, and then a lot of times the playing will turn into fighting. And once it turns into fighting or it gets too loud, what ends up happening is Quarter, I have to go in, and so if I go in, I open the door, and they've been fighting for a while. If you're a parent of young kids or you have been before, you know how this game is about to go. I'm trying to figure out what actually happened, all right? And so I'm trying to talk to a 4-year-old who's mad and frustrated and sad, and a 3-year-old who's mad and frustrated and sad, and try to figure out what happened. So, Micah, what happened? Gray threw the Hot Wheels car at me, Daddy. And Gray's like, you wanted me to throw it, Micah. And Micah's like, I wanted you to give it to me, not throw it. And then Grace is like, ah, and then I'm like, what actually happened? And I don't have any idea, right? I just see like one of them seems mad and the other seems really mad, and I don't know. And so sometimes I just figure out like who just annoyed me most today, and maybe that's the one I'm gonna like discipline in this moment, right? I'm just gonna pick one in terms of who I need to go after. But ultimately, I don't know how to like parent in that moment a lot of times because I'm like, what happened? What happened, right? Like who actually did what? So who do I comfort? Who do I console? Who do I kind of got to get on or discipline? I don't know. But we live in 2025, and so here's something that is amazing. Sometimes I get unique access, and what I mean is this. We have a baby monitor in their room, okay? So sometimes I start to hear this go down a little bit in their room, and so I pull out the app that shows me the camera, and I get play-by-play footage. So I am watching what is going on. So I'm like, okay, Micah got out of his bed. He yelled at Gray. Gray got sad. Gray started crying. Gray pushed Micah. Okay, Micah took his shirt off. Don't know why. Micah did that. Okay, Micah went over and got the toys, and he started like taking them from Gray. And so I get to see all of that. And then I get to walk into the room and open the door, and I kind of feel like Jesus in that moment. Because like Jesus sometimes, he like asks questions, but he's Jesus, so he knew the answer. So I'm like, I know everything, but I'll say, what happened, boys? What happened? But here's the truth. In that scenario, because I have the footage and because I saw what actually went down, I know what I got to do. I know what parenting looks like in that moment. Why? Because I saw the footage. I know what happened. Here's the deal with our life, guys. If we're able to actually slow down, look at the footage of our life, it's gonna help us know, how do I actually move forward and take the right next steps? So how are things actually going? How are things? And if we are able to look at the footage, so to speak, and slow down, we're gonna help ourselves define reality, which will help us make good decisions. But here's what I know. Often the times we're most busy or overwhelmed are the times we wanna do this the least. We're like, you know what I'd love not to do? Or I don't want right now to like sit down and journal and process, how's life going? I'm just tired of life. But that's when we need to do it the most. And so how do you ask yourself really good questions about what's going on in your life right now? So I wrote down a few. This one is not rocket science, it's so simple, but just asking, how is blank going really? How is your job really? Really? How many hours are you really working? Is that because they asked you to or because you wanted to? Big difference. How is my marriage really? Because I know if that's off, everything feels a little bit harder, and maybe I'm overwhelmed, not because of the quantity of things in my life, but because I don't have emotional capacity right now because my marriage is not in a good place. I mean, what has gone on in my life recently that is maybe hurting me or I need to process, but how is blank going really? Here's a tough one. How am I negatively contributing to feeling overwhelmed? So maybe it's like, I just feel so busy, and you point the finger to all these different things in your life. I feel so tired every day. But you're on your phone for 45 minutes every night in bed. I just don't feel like I have energy, and I get to the end of days, but you're not caring about your diet at all, so you're not giving your body what it needs to have energy and to think well. So this is where it gets hard. But when you define reality accurately, you have to be brutally honest. And go, what am I contributing to this? So are you asking those questions? Maybe you need to ask this, what about this season is like a new normal, and the problem isn't what's going on, the problem is that I haven't adjusted to it. So if right now we have a 4-month-old, if I'm constantly feeling overwhelmed by the fact that I have to change diapers, it's like, dude, you have a 4-month-old, you gotta get used to it. Like you gotta adjust your expectations. Doesn't mean I'm not busy, I just need to adjust to that. And for some things, it becomes this: what is a current reality that's actually not gonna be true in the next season? So maybe you're a tax person and it's the end of March. And you're like, I work all day, I don't even sleep anymore. But guess what? You're gonna get to July at some point. You'll get to June, you'll get a breather. And so you get to parse out in your head, okay, the season isn't gonna last forever. So defining reality accurately means asking yourself hard questions. And I guess my question to you is, are you doing that? Are you being brutally honest as you examine, investigate, as you anakrina, discern what is true in your life? So it starts with looking at the tape, so to speak, going, how are things going really? And then it gets to number 2. If you've done that well, to kind of know where you're at, know why you're where you're at. Second thing, it becomes really important to have discernment. And this is something, again, we see flow out of the passage. We need to prioritize and filter opportunities aggressively. We need to prioritize and filter opportunities aggressively. So implicit in Paul saying, be very careful how you live, and him saying it takes wisdom, is like you need to actually learn how to say yes to the right things and no to the right things. You need to learn how to filter things well, and you need to do that aggressively, right? It wasn't just be careful, it's be very careful. It wasn't make the most of some opportunities, make the most of every opportunity. And so we need to learn how to prioritize and filter options aggressively. And we know how to do this. We know how to do this in the big things in life, right? If you're buying a house, you'll do this. You'll go, all right, I wanna make sure it's got all the things I want it to have, and so our priority number one is like square footage, because we wanna make sure we're ready for the kids that we have, and another one that we wanna have, and we wanna make sure we have a yard, and so that is priority for us. And then you look at things like, man, when were the windows last done, because I don't wanna have to pay that money down the road, and just trying to be good stewards of that, and like, you know what it's like to look at a decision and be actually thorough and aggressive about going, we want to make the right decision, so we're gonna ask a bunch of questions and prioritize and filter accordingly. So we do that in the macro, in the big things, but what does it actually look like for us to do that well in the micro decisions? So how do we actually, when things come our way, not just go, sure, I'll do that. For some of you, you're like, yeah, I'd love to host a national championship party. And you said that like a month ago, and you didn't even look that it was Monday night at like 7:45. And so you had people over to your house till like 12:30 on Monday night. And it was great, but you were tired for the rest of the week, right? And you didn't do the sort of work on the front end to go, should I do that? Is that wise? When is the kids' practice? How do all those things play out? Did you prioritize and filter the options aggressively? And I wanna maybe for a second say why this matters. And I think we know this. And like the busyness and overwhelm speaks to this. But I heard this said here at Grace like, man, probably a decade ago, and it's stuck with me. There was a talk on like stress and margin, and one of the phrases that was said is small margins lead to big messes. And one of the reasons why this is so important is because I'll actually add to it. Small margin in our life can lead to big messes and big misses. For some of you, you didn't do this well. In a season, you didn't prioritize the right things, and you worked so much and you got the promotion, but like you missed a season of your kid's life. And you're like, man, how would things have been differently for him if I was really there for him when he was in 7th grade? And you're living with that because you didn't do this work at a certain point. And so sometimes it's not just a miss, it's a mess. Like sometimes not doing this and getting so overwhelmed and busy is like why affairs happen. So people get so stressed out and they're strung out with things and it's so overwhelming and they start to not make good decisions. So you start to make these messes in your life of regret and shame and things you would never normally do, but in part because you haven't filtered and prioritized things aggressively. So how do you do this work? Well, again, what we said is like a meaningful life is a Jesus-centered, spirit-dependent one for the glory of God. So like, are you prioritizing and filtering things the right way? Not everything gets the same priority. You know what should be first in priority is the things of God. It's like, are you filtering and prioritizing those things first? Are those the big rocks, so to speak, that go in your jar first, that take up space because you know they have to be there? Or is it like, man, I heard kids' sports is coming up, and so I'm gonna say yes to that kid joining the league, and you didn't check to see if it was on Sunday or on Thursday. And so you put that in first, and then what gets pushed out? Church. And so are you prioritizing and filtering the things of God first? And then again, it takes wisdom to go, okay, good things, and how do I balance, and how do I physical health and mental health and job and all of that. But we're never gonna get there if we don't actually have this bone or this muscle in us to prioritize and filter things aggressively. So my challenge to you is to like have some sort of a process. Here's one I thought of that I think would be awesome, all right? Not everybody here is in a small group. I'd love it if you would be. I think it'd be great for you, but let's pretend you were. We call them grace groups or Bible studies here, but let's pretend you're in a grace group. What if, before you said yes to anything that's going to be ongoing in your life, you made it such that your grace group leader had to approve that? So you're like, before I say yes to another kid's sport, I'm gonna ask them, do you think this is wise? Do you think this is good? Do you think this is the most God-glorifying thing for me right now? That's an aggressive approach to prioritizing and filtering. To go, I'm not just gonna choose, I'm actually gonna have them speak into it. Because maybe I'm not realizing it, but I'm idolizing my kids. Or I'm idolizing my job, and so I want some other wisdom to speak to that. So again, it's not always gonna be how do I prioritize and filter so I'm not busy, but how are we busy about the right things? Busy about the things of God and doing that in a way that's reasonable and sustainable. How are we busy about rest? How are we busy about ordering our life the way God would call us to? so that it's not life too full, but it is life to the full. So first two are huge. Define reality accurately. Second, we have to make sure we prioritize and filter aggressively. But the third is what brings it all together. And we'll be brief on this, but it's so important. Here's what it is. The third one is this: to have discernment is to seek and submit to the Spirit actively. Seek and submit to the Spirit actively. There's a whole message to be had in just this point. But Paul says, don't be filled with wine. Don't be drunk on wine. Don't numb things. Don't pursue the things of this world. But if you want to have a life that's well-ordered, that's meaningful, that's sustainable, be filled with the Spirit of God. Trying to live like a godly life, but not living it by the power of the Spirit of God is a recipe to be exhausted. The Bible doesn't teach that somebody like me gets up, or you read the Bible yourself and you hear it, and then you try to just like muscle your way into obedience and goodness in your life. You know what it says? Rely on the Spirit of God. He is with you, so let him comfort you. Be still and let him fight for you. If you need wisdom, ask him. He will give it to you. Are you seeking and submitting to the Spirit of God? And then this is the kicker: actively. Here's what I've felt. I'll be honest with y'all. There's a lot of times in my life where I love the fact that the Spirit is with me, and theologically I know he indwells me and I get all of that, but I'm not actively listening. My ear isn't like open going, Spirit, what do you have for me? What are you saying to me? What's the wisdom here? What's the learning from the message I need to have? Spirit, what is you're saying to me today? And then when I'm within the things that I've said yes to in my life, Spirit, make these meaningful. When I am at practice or waiting for the thing, God, make me have like the eyes to see what's the best use of this opportunity, as Paul says. How do I actually rest well? And some of that is wisdom, some of that's just being careful, some of that is reading the Bible, some of that is looking and listening to the Spirit going, I need to hear your voice, your perspective. I need your comfort, I need your guidance, and then as I'm living my life, I want to live it with you. Not just a life for God, but a life with God. So that every day as you're at your job, the Spirit's with you. And not only is he with you, but you're listening, you're hearing, you're going, God, I'm glad you're with me. Thanks that you're with me. What do you have to say to me? Thanks for comforting me. Thanks for giving me wisdom. But it's never going to happen again if we don't seek and actually submit to the Spirit of God. And I know for some, as I put this up here, like you're going, I don't even know how to do that. Like I love the idea of that. I don't know how to do that. Here's what I would say. Start with trying. Start with just trying to listen. Even praying the prayer, God, Spirit, would you speak to me? Would you impress something on me that I could like respond to and learn from? If we're gonna order our days well, it demands God-given discernment. That looks like defining reality accurately. It looks like prioritizing and filtering things aggressively to make sure the right things are in your life. And then it means walking well with the Spirit in and through all of it. And we've talked about a lot in this series, and even a lot just right now in terms of what it means to not be normal. What it means to not just do things a normal way, but the godly way. And again, I summarized some of where we've been in the last few weeks, but I want to really put the ball in your court as we wrap up this weekend. We never want to just preach or to have these message series and then have you nod your head to parts of it, but not actually apply it. And so I want to really challenge you right now to apply something from this series to your life. I put it to you this way as you think about thinking about it and then applying it. I want you to see the space between your normal life and a Jesus-centered life. And then I want you to take action accordingly. So for each and every one of you, I want you to see the space between the normal aspects of your life, the things you know you're doing that aren't the way God would want you to do them, and then how do you see and understand a Jesus-centered life, and then again, take action accordingly. So I want to give you an action step that helps you with this, that propels you into this, all right? So I want you to do this, and for real, like before you leave today, I'd love for you to write these things on your program. You'll see this on the screen. I'd love for you to write it down. I want you to write one step, all right? Just one. You could do a lot more, but for right now, just one, where you want to move from normal to Jesus-centered living. And maybe the step isn't an action yet in terms of something you know you need to change or move. Maybe it's a prayer. Maybe it is a conversation you need to have. But what I want you to do is to include the step on your notes, and then I want you to make a deadline. Make it up whenever you want it to be. It could be the end of the day. It could be by the end of the week. It could be 2 days from now. Write a deadline so that you're like, I have to get this done by then. And then I want you to write a person you'll tell, all right? A person you'll tell. You're way more likely to take a step if you not only have a deadline, but also tell a person and they can follow up with you. So whatever it is, maybe it's about your focus or it's about discouragement. Maybe it is about the busyness or the overwhelm of your life. Maybe it's about giving or generosity like we talked about last week. But what's one step you can take and write those things on your program? I trust this has been implicit again in what we've been talking about when we were saying don't do normal. But there's a lot at stake with our life. There's a lot at stake with just doing normal. The Bible would say the things that are normal, that are just worldly or in a sinful, broken world aren't gonna lead to fulfillment or joy or peace or ultimately the eternal things we would want them to lead to. And so we don't wanna do that. We wanna walk in the way that God calls us to walk for His glory and for our good. And there's a big difference between those two. And so a part of this series is a caution, right? To say, don't go the normal way. Listen to an interview a while back with a guy named, a lot of you know, Shaquille O'Neal, Shaq. He's one of the best centers in the NBA ever. He was amazing at basketball, and not only that, but he's like a really likable guy in terms of the public eye, and so he does a lot of TV now, so he'll announce a lot of different things, and so incredibly, wildly successful. Has a ton of money, a superstar in every sense of the term, and has more than he knows what to do with in terms of the stuff of life. And he was on a podcast with a guy named Jason Kelce, who was a superstar in his own right. He was a football player and thinking about retiring. And so Shaq was talking to Jason Kelce. They're talking about a lot of different things, but Jason was processing retirement, and Shaq basically like turned into like dad mode where he wanted to give some advice to Jason. And so Shaq started to talk about some things that he had gotten wrong that he didn't want Jason to get wrong. And he basically started to talk about how functionally he lost his whole family. That amidst doing the normal of being a superstar, he just kind of did the things that everybody did, and it blew up his life. He lost family because of it. People left him. Like he was like, I was an idiot. I made a bunch of mistakes. He said these things to Jason. And then he said something I'll never forget, because I remember like the sobriety with which he said that, because I was watching this podcast in a video form, and he looked at Jason Kelce and he said, Jason, I live in a 100,000 square foot house all by myself. And in that moment, what he was saying to him is, don't do what I did. Normal got me a lot of stuff. Success beyond anything I could imagine. Money more than I could ever imagine. Prestige and notoriety more than I could ever imagine. But I lost track of the right things in life. He's like, don't do what I did. So he was like, love your wife, love your kids, take care of them, make sure you're about the right stuff. Guys, normal doesn't lead to fulfillment. It doesn't lead to peace and joy and the type of purpose you want for your life. So let's not do it. And not only fight that, but actually work towards just a more Jesus-centered life dependent on the Spirit for the glory of God. I hope and I pray that we're a church that isn't just like thoughtful about normal in our life, but like fights it. And that all of us go, I want a life built on Jesus. Let's pray together to that end right now. Father, even as I pray and am the one communicating this, God, there's so much of this that is a mirror up to my soul about how I'm navigating things and processing things. And so, God, I pray this would just ring true in my soul. And I do pray, as I know a lot of this, God, is biblical principles and practical things, Lord, that we would know how to apply it. The Spirit of God, you would give us wisdom and discernment, this anakrino, this ability to investigate and scrutinize. And Spirit of God, that we would listen well to you, that we'd be full of you in such a way that like actually makes a difference. And God, for those right now who need comforted because they're just overwhelmed even by this conversation, would you do that? Like right now, would you do that? for those that need convicted and pushed and challenged and pressed to take some steps, Spirit of God, would you do that? Would this be like something that doesn't go away in their heart and mind until you've done the work in them that you want to do and they've responded to that? But ultimately, God, would you give us the discernment to know what it looks like to order our days in such a way where we live life to the full, we give you glory. God, within all of this, we know you're gracious and you're good, and so many times we get it wrong and we fail and we misorder things, but God, you never do. So for a moment, God, we want to just praise you that you are perfect, that you never fail, that our life is lived rightly when it's lived on your foundation. So God, thank you for your goodness and your grace, your holiness. We pray all this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
As we're closing out this series, I want to invite you to stand. As we sing, we respond, and we say, God, we want you to be the center of our lives. Christ is my firm foundation. He's the rock on which I stand. Everything around me is shaken. No, I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus. 'Cause he's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would he fail now? He won't. I've still got joy in chaos. I've got peace that makes no sense. So I won't be going under. I'm not held by my own strength. 'Cause I built my life on Jesus. 'Cause he's never let me down. He's faithful in every season. So why would he fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. Christ is my firm foundation. He's the rock on which I stand. Where everything around me is shaken. No, I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus. 'Cause he's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would he fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. Never fail. Sing this. Rain came and blew. My house was built on you. I'm safe with you. I'm gonna make it through. Let's believe that. Came and blew. My house was built on you. I'm safe with you. I'm gonna make
for those who have been here for this whole series, I really want to challenge you to do the homework step in the action assignment that Pastor Jake just shared. I know sometimes we can hear a message and get to the homework and like kind of ignore it and whatever, but I really want you to think about something in your life right now that you would define as normal based on the conversations that we've had. Maybe normal for you is you're discouraged or burdened by money, or the conversation tonight resonated with you, but figure out what a next step looks like for you to not do normal, to not do worldly, but to honor God in the way that you live. I think if you do that, I think your life and your faith will be stronger and better for it. I have a bit of a special announcement tonight. Like I said, I lead the young adult ministry here at Grace called The Commons. The Commons is for young adults age 18 through 29. And tonight we have an event actually right after this service called Commons Late Night, where we are providing canes for all the young adults that are here at service tonight. So if that's you, if you're a young adult, we would love to see you there. It's in the studio, which is on the other side of the new lobby. We would love to say hi, play some games and all that kind of stuff. If you're here tonight and you need prayer for anything, there'll be folks to the left of stage who would love an opportunity to pray with you and for you. And if you're new, I would encourage you to stop by Grace Central on your way out. Thanks for being here. We're excited to kick off that new series next week. See you guys.